Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 13 Pro has been out for a little over 6 months at this point, and this is a phone that I still think is the perfect phone for most people. It's a phone I find myself coming back to over and over because it's a very manageable size. Even though I have huge hands, it's still a manageable size where I can easily reach across it to maybe scroll or just something else, one-handed use. And with the 13 Pro Max that I find myself using a lot of the time also, it's just more of an unwieldy phone. It's heavier, it's much larger, and of course that comes with some advantages, but I really like the 13 Pro. So I thought we'd talk about durability, scratches, PWM, the way it manages brightness as far as the display, speakers, reception, and more. Now, the first thing is durability. This is a stainless steel phone, so because it's stainless steel, if you're not using a case, you can expect a few scratches. They could be micro scratches, or you can see here, while this is not heavily used, it does have some scratches around the outside edge, even though it's kept in a case from time to time. So that edge does develop some scratches, whether that be from setting it down, maybe you're plugging in the lightning cable, bumping it into the wrong spot multiple times. Sometimes it can develop scratches. And it's a fingerprint magnet around the glossy edge. As you can see, there's already some fingerprints here, and that's just from me recording this video. I typically clean it before I record the video, and we've still got a ton of fingerprints. However, durability-wise, it holds up well, and the back glass holds up really well also. Being that we've got ceramic shield on it, and then also matte glass on the back, it holds up well to the point where you can't notice any scratches, even if there were some light ones. Also, the camera lenses have held up really well. Despite the level of sapphire they may be, or grade of sapphire, they seem to hold up really well. The only thing I've seen on some of these is where some of the surface coating wears off around the outside ring. So that I've seen on the 13 Pro Max and other 13 Pros, but if you're using a case, you generally don't see that. As far as the forward glass, well, the front glass is pretty durable. So ceramic shield does seem to hold up well, although I do have one small scratch right there from some reason. I'm not sure what that's from. And of course, all of this is avoidable by using a case or screen protector. So if you do use a screen protector regularly, of course, you won't have that issue. And now I do use a case on this from time to time. In fact, this is sort of a field camera that I use. I record a lot of videos on the weekend and use this for the cameras when I'm outside oftentimes. So I'll use this and then have a case on it just because I'm outside, and I find that's where I am the most careless and develop the most scratches, whether that be setting it on a picnic table, maybe hitting it against a nail that's sticking out a little further than it should, things like that. So I typically use this case. And the silicone case is actually held up pretty well also. So durability of this case, because they don't have the cutout on the bottom, seems to hold up better, but it seems to do a good job. It's not super thick, will help with some drops, and has kept that camera off the table and things to maybe stop it from developing that wear. So it's held up well. These cases seem to be fine for that. Now, other than scratches though, the display is something that's really great. Probably the best thing on this phone. You've got a 120 Hertz ProMotion display, so super smooth scrolling. But not only that, you have great viewing angles. It's super bright, 1000 nits at regular brightness, 1200 with HDR, and it just looks good overall. So this is the best display Apple's ever had, this along with the Pro Max version. And then of course, because it can control the hertz down to 10 hertz up to 120 hertz, you actually get better battery life because of that, because it can bring the screen refresh rate down when you don't need it. Just where on this, it doesn't have a problem with that. And then it helps with the battery life. And then of course, with PWM, many people ask me pretty much every day still, does the 13 bother your eyes? Does the 13 Pro bother your eyes? And with the 13 Pro and Pro Max, it does appear that Apple is not only using PWM to control brightness or pulse width modulation. What it does is flash the screen faster and slower to make it look brighter or dimmer or more dim. And what they do with this is typically raise the rate up high enough that it doesn't bother your eyes. However, with the 13 Pro and Pro Max, some people are saying that they think they're using DC dimming, which means that it's at a constant and not necessarily flashing all the time. That would explain why this display doesn't bother me at all. In fact, at 240 frames under slow-mo, you can't really pick up the screen flashing. This again leads me to believe they're using DC dimming to help with maybe eye strain. So zero eye strain on the Pro and Pro Max. So if you're looking for an OLED display, you want to try one that shouldn't bother your eyes. If you're sensitive to that, then this is the one I would try out. Now, there have been some issues for some people with green tint. I haven't noticed any, whether that be at dim levels or the phone is hot or anything like that. I haven't noticed that on the 13 Pro. Some people say that it's on all of them. I haven't seen it. I have seen it on one Pro Max, but I have not seen it on this 13 Pro. So it is something that some people do see from time to time. I haven't experienced it, thankfully, but it does seem to maintain its color accuracy. It's nicer than the previous generation of the 12 Pro. It seems to be less warm. Now, with the 12 Pro on the left and the 13 Pro on the right, you can see obviously there's a difference with the notch, but also the colors are a little bit different, and this is more noticeable when you have a white background. So maybe in settings here, you can see on the left the 12 Pro is a bit warmer. I think most people like the look of the 13 Pro a little bit better, and the 12 Pro could technically be more color accurate, but either way, I think most people will be pleased with the 13 Pro display. Like I said, it's super vibrant and goes really bright when in HDR. So here's one of my HDR videos. So you do have up to 4K HDR. As far as viewing this on YouTube, it's an HDR display. You can go up to 4K and it looks really good. So it's super bright and we're not even at the highest brightness and it's probably not showing properly on the display. So it gives you an idea of just how bright this really is. And so it does a great job in sunlight. There's no issues there. And everything else about this display is great. Now, the speakers have held up well also. So the speakers on the phone are nice and loud. They're vibrant. They have a good sound to them and good stereo sound. And they've held up well over time. So take a listen just in case you haven't heard them. So the speakers have maintained their loudness. We're getting almost 80 decibels out of it, at least according to what we have on the watch with the noise meter. And as far as just sounding clear, they're clear at the highest volume. So they've held up well as far as that goes. Now, when it comes to reception, it's pretty good overall, but it's really hit or miss when it switches between 5G and other modes. Now, this could be just T-Mobile or something else, but you can see we're on 5G now, and we have a couple bars. And reception is pretty good. I haven't had any dropped calls or anything like that. And maybe if we go to speed test here, we can just check what it's like in my area. But this can vary, of course, depending on your carrier, how busy it is, where you live, how many people are on those cell towers, and more. But this gives you an idea. I'm inside a brick building, so the signal isn't the greatest, and we're getting about 60 to 65 megabits per second. So it's not amazing, but it's definitely fine. 4K video is 15 megabits per second, so it's more than enough to watch video. And of course, we're getting about 5 megabits per second up. This varies greatly. If I go outside by where I live, I can get well over 200 sometimes down, and sometimes much faster upload speed. So it just depends where you are, and of course the saturation of the cell tower, but it seems to work fine. The main issue I have is with it switching between different modes. So maybe you're switching between 5G and 5G UC or 4G. Sometimes it drops for a moment and then it will pick back up. So if you're in the middle of streaming something, you could have an interruption there. That's something I find to be true on most different phones that have the later modems. Now, I don't know if it's a modem issue or a carrier issue, but with iOS 15, it seems to have improved, but it still is an issue from time to time. So 15.4 seems to fix most of those issues, but it still could be an issue. The cameras on the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max are the exact same, so we have no compromises there, and they're really phenomenal. In fact, I could have recorded this whole video with them, and most people would love the way the footage looks. They have fast focus. They may be a little over sharp at times, but they're really great, especially if you have the correct lighting. There is one thing that makes it even better is ProRes. So you have ProRes, but my only complaint about ProRes is the files are so large. You'll see here it says 19 minutes left as far as the amount of footage we can record in 4K. The files are so large that getting them off of the device is a bit of a hassle. Whether you're using Lightning or maybe you're airdropping them or waiting for them to upload to your photo library and then download them after. I tried this the other day with a 10-minute video and it took about a half hour to get it off the phone and it failed once, so I had to do it again. This is something that I think Apple really needs to improve with the next one. As you have 200 gigabyte files, you really need USB-C or maybe a new version of AirDrop to get that off of your device quickly. That's something I think they need to fix. Otherwise, I love to use ProRes, but I often don't because of how long it takes to offload the footage. So I'll just hit a video like this or hit record. And this is the front-facing camera from the 13 Pro. So I'm recording handheld, and that's all there is to it. Hit the button, it looks good, handles the audio and everything else, and it's the audio directly from the mic from the 13 Pro. So this is good enough to just use. Maybe you want to vlog, take it on a walk, or just record it for a YouTube video. It's much better than I think most people realize. Whether or not you're using ProRes doesn't seem to matter in certain lighting conditions, so it really doesn't seem to make a difference depending. So oftentimes I'll find myself not using ProRes just so I can get the footage off the phone more quickly. When it comes to battery, this phone will get me through a day without a problem. Typically by the time I go to bed at night, I'll be down to about 30 to 40% on this phone. On a Pro Max, I'll stay a little bit higher, around 50%. So it definitely doesn't get the battery life of the Pro Max just because it has a smaller battery. But it easily will get you through the day, and I have no issues there. When it comes to battery health, this is something I tell people not to worry about. You can try and manage it all you want by keeping it below 80% or anything like that and using slower chargers, but you'll end up with maybe saving 3% of your battery when most people swap their phones every couple of years anyway. You can just swap the battery. I personally don't worry about it. There's other things going on in the world that I find to be much more important than worrying about that. So I wish Apple would change this from a percentage to a good or bad, and it's time to change your battery. But you'll see I'm at 100% here. I'm at 100% on my Pro Max that I've used even more than this phone, and I would expect that to drop down to 99 or 98%. 80% after 2 years is completely normal, and then it's time to swap the battery if it can no longer provide voltage that you need for the phone to perform at the highest rate. So it will just tell you here, we're at peak performance capability. It'll tell you to replace the battery, bring it to Apple or a nearby service center, or you can even do it yourself and swap the battery and you're back up to normal and fast performance. So it's something I don't really worry about. It's $60 to $70 to swap the battery every few years if you need it, if you're not swapping your phone. As far as the overall speed, well, because it has the A15 Bionic, the latest chip with 6 gigs of RAM, it's just super fast all the time. Between ProMotion and the chipset, it's fast to open just about everything you would want. Go back in, out, go to different apps, you're out, control things as fast as you want, change settings, whatever. It just seems to respond incredibly fast. It's the fastest chip out there from any manufacturer, and it probably will be for a couple of years. So it's super fast, no concerns there. And of course, this came installed with iOS 15, which means Apple is going to be supporting this usually for at least 5 years, maybe even 6, like the iPhone 6s Plus or 6s. So that means iOS 20 or iOS 21, maybe something along those lines before it would end support. So obviously it's going to get all of the latest updates for years and years. So there's no concern there. And of course, you'll get new features with iOS 16 and whatever regular version releases they have with different features and more. As far as if you should pick one up today, well, that depends on a couple different things. Of course, whether or not you want to have the latest and greatest. We're about 6 months out probably from the iPhone 14 or 14 Pro and Pro Max. I would probably wait if you want the latest phones. However, if you don't care about that, mid-September is typically when they release the next phones. If you don't care about any of that, then of course it's the best phone you can buy from Apple right now. It's probably the best size, and it's really a great phone to use overall. Like I said before, my main complaint is just getting ProRes footage off of it. Other than that, I really have no complaints, and it's the best iPhone Apple has ever made. I'd love to hear what you think about it, though, in the comments below. And of course, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already, though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.